Hello and welcome to Masters of Divinity. I am your moderator, JP, and I am here as always with Father Chuck.
As always.
Well, I'm just not realizing this is the first episode I've recorded in like 3 episodes.
Oh, that's right.
Wow,
that's right.
Yeah.
So I've been moderating the past several of them.
I know.
Me and Father Fun just holding down the fort.
I'm just like snuggling right back into it, you know, like it's like I never got off. Like it's
It
like
actually
riding a bike.
does feel that way. Yes.
Yeah. Like everyone's just there's like 3 episodes, no JP, and now he's here all of a sudden, and he just expects me to just let him walk right back into my life. Yes.
That's crazy. I mean, because it was like 3 episodes that you were away, that you were just editing, and then we've been away for like 3 weeks because of various things, including the birth of my daughter.
Right. Yes.
Yay, congratulations.
Thank you. Month old on Sunday she was.
Yes. Congratulations and welcome to Earth, Coravan. Matt's going to be here in just a minute. He's being occasional as he is. We're also here with one of our fans who also happens to be one of our contributors. If you have been listening to us for a while, you'll know that we have a Patreon. And if you contribute to it, you get some. You'll eventually get some cool perks.
Yeah, I don't have Gundams to give away anymore.
Yeah, we're also here with Mike, who is one of our contributors and a big fan of the podcast. And Mike, we are so glad to have you here, and we're also very glad. We're very thankful for all your contributions to the podcast. Yes.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for the good content.
Thank you, and that's what you get if you contribute to the podcast. You get an episode, and because of his contributions, we've allowed him to be in this episode with us. And he's also decided our topic, which we'll get to in just a minute. Which you probably know what it is. There's a big giant boulder behind me.
It's subtle.
The title is also probably a big part of it too. So Mike, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? This is actually kind of our first time meeting you face to face. So who are you? What do you do?
I will say it's a little surreal. You guys talking to me rather than just at me through the medium of YouTube. So
right.
It's taking a little bit of getting used to. I forget I'm on camera. I'm living in Western Canada. I'm about the same age as you guys. Similar growing up.
Great. So the SEO is working. That's good.
Yeah, it's working really well. I've been a listener and watcher of your podcast for probably about 3 years now, I think. All
right, you're hardcore then. That's almost a lifer. Like we started, I think, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So you've been around for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
when I came in, I think you were episode 50 thereabouts.
Whoa. Yeah, that feels like a decade ago. Well, that's great, man. That means you've kind of seen us in all forms.
I have to ask. So, what was your first episode?
The first episode I actually listened to was your Star Trek 50th anniversary, rather.
Okay,
that's a good one.
That was the first one I listened to. I was looking for a theology podcast to listen to on my way to work. I was scrolling through and oh, Joel Osteen, no. Just kept going, and then wait, was that a Masters of the Universe logo? I just kind of scrolled back up. Okay, I'll give that one a try. Scroll through the episodes, got that one because I'm a huge Star Trek nerd. Nice. And within, the first couple of minutes, I hear Father Chuck refer to Matt as a Calvinist because he preferred the Kelvin timeline.
Yeah.
Like with puns like that, these are my people. These are my guys.
I will
to that
say,
and then just went back to the beginning and went all the way through.
I think Calvinism is our finest joke.
It was really good.
I've tried to use it in other spaces of the internet, not catching on, but that's okay. I don't want people ripping it off. It's ours. It belongs to us. We're going to patent it.
Persistence is key.
It's our fetch.
Yeah. Well, that's actually really cool. We like hearing about that kind of stuff. It's also really encouraging that meeting people who listen to the podcast, because it really is. Sometimes it just feels like just like the three of us just shouting at each other and at the void. And we have these numbers on SoundCloud, but we don't trust those numbers. They could be robots for all we know. So we know of you because you've been interacting with us on our Facebook page and stuff, which, by the way, we have a Facebook page if you want to find that and like that. You'll have access to all of our content there. And so that's kind of how we know about you. So as part of our perks for being a patron, we've allowed him on the episode and also to choose our topic. And Mike, why don't you tell the guests what we're talking about today?
The topic for today is something near and dear to my heart, and that's the Indiana Jones franchise.
Yeah.
I initially suggested the 3 movies. It is a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that might be fun because it's a good mix. Obviously, they're great films. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And influential. There's a theology bent to it, so I figured it all kind of like perfect.
Yeah, it is perfect.
When Matt mentioned to us that you had suggested the Indiana Jones trilogy, his comment to us was, "I can't believe we hadn't thought of this before." Like, this is totally, it hits all the stuff. Like, it's totally up our alley. It's theology, it's adventure, it's fantasy, it's all of that. And
I can go on wild tangents about cinema.
Yeah.
Yep.
As you did on your Instagram account.
Oh, that was fun. I'll talk about that later.
Matt says he's on.
Oh, he's on. Okay, let's see.
The occasion is here. It's Kairos time.
What?
So there's 2 types of time spoken of in the Bible. There's Kairos time and there's Chronos time. Chronos time is like measured calendar time. Kairos time is like the fullness of time when things are right. And so now when Matt is here, he arrives at Kairos time. It is the right time.
I timed that. Check it out.
Yeah, I was talking about Kairos time, Matt.
Wonderful.
I'm going to have a problem with this Mike Matt thing, by the way. I'm just going to put that out there.
Probably talk to them for a whole 30 seconds, so they probably already got you set up to replace me on the podcast. It's fine. That's how it works.
Sure.
I think they need a token non-bearded person on the podcast.
That's true.
So I don't think
That's
that would
true.
work.
We can't just be a bunch of white guys with beards on this podcast. You can't. We won't stand out at all.
It's only because I professionally cannot have it. So.
Cool. All right. Well, we just did introductions, Matt, and Mike just told us why he chose Indiana Jones and what the topic is and stuff like that. And did you notice the behind me?
Oh yeah. That's cool. That's cool.
You didn't say anything, so that's why I'm asking
No,
you.
I mean, I'm on a phone screen, JP. I barely noticed that there's 3 faces talking to me.
Good.
They're just kind of moving dots. But
Sure.
It's all good.
Sure.
It's all good.
Okay. Great.
Can
okay.
I just say something real quick? I just have another thing I have to sort of expunge from my brain. Otherwise, it's going to bug me. Every time we talk right now, I'm like resisting, like actively resisting, like not just doing the Indiana Jones theme.
I have like all the themes in my head going on at the same time because I binged them all last night.
Oh, okay.
I didn't finish Crystal Skull though because I ran out of time.
That's all right. You shouldn't have started Crystal Skull.
We're gonna have fun.
You got the first 2 acts. You're good. After the third,
this is gonna be fun. Okay, so let's dive in, boys. I wanted to start off before we get to Indy. Let's talk about the man behind Indiana Jones for just a minute. And I'm talking, of
George
course,
Lucas.
Well,
Sean Patrick Flannery.
River Phoenix, obviously. I'm talking, of course, about Harrison Ford. Kind of, I don't know. I think Harrison Ford is a sort of linchpin of Indiana Jones. I think if anyone else had played him, one of the picks was Tom Selleck. It would have been a completely different. Raiders would have been a completely different movie if like Tom Selleck had played Harrison Ford.
Oh yeah, and if anybody listening didn't know that already, go to YouTube and look up the screen test of him playing Indiana Jones.
Oh, I've never watched a screen test before.
Seriously,
Yeah.
you've never seen? It's the bar scene where they're
the tavern
talking
scene,
in the
yeah.
bar. Yeah, I mean tavern. Yeah, it's interesting, and I can't say he's horrible, but it's not Indiana Jones.
Hello, Murder.
We ended up doing a screen test with Tom Selleck and Sean Young, and it was really, really good. I mean, they were both terrific actors, and it turned out really well.
Look, I did what I did. I don't expect you to be happy about it. But maybe it can do us both some good.
Why start
Just
now?
shut up! Shut up and listen to me. Now, I need that piece your father had.
So,
Right.
That would have been a very different world.
And there was an episode of Magnum PI where they spoofed Indiana Jones.
Was there?
So if you ever want to get a picture in your head of what that was like,
I got to seek that out.
that up.
That would be great. I love Magnum PI, and Chuck should watch that too. He's basically
'cause
Magnum PI now.
I live in Magnum PI.
Yeah. But no, Harrison Ford to me is the linchpin of Indiana Jones. I think he was sort of like kind of the rarity actor of his time that like perfectly fit like what Spielberg and Lucas were looking for, which was like someone who could bring back that sort of presence that you felt with actors like Humphrey Bogart, Cary Grant. I'm blanking. What was the other one I was thinking about? Crap. Clark Gable. These were all like actors that I think. I mean, more so Humphrey Bogart from the movie Treasure of Sierra Madre. But these are the kind of actors that Harrison Ford kind of definitely embodies, and I think he might be actually like one of the last, like him, and I think Jack Nicholson. So yeah, and I think that presence was needed to kind of make this movie so distinct in that it's supposed to be that sort of Republic Pictures serial kind of feel, and you need that presence of someone like Harrison Ford. But what do you guys think about Harrison Ford? I know it's such a broad question. Like, I'm just asking you white guys and millennials like what they thought about Harrison Ford. Like, what's? He's basically my dad. That what?
I think. Well, I mean, Harrison Ford is the fact that there is sort of a grumpiness to Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Really helps because you kind of get the sense that he's somewhat put upon all the time.
Yeah.
And you kind of, especially when he's in the classroom, you get the sense, it really comes across that it's like he's doing this because he has to. Mm-hmm. He would much rather be out adventuring.
Yeah.
I mean, by all accounts, he's a good teacher, but you can tell that that's not what he lives for, right? That's what's paying the bills, so he can do the other thing, right? That's the making the movie Titanic so that you can go out and actually see the Titanic in your submarine, right?
Yeah.
James Cameron reference.
Yeah. Are you saying James Cameron is a modern day Indiana Jones?
Sure, why not? But I think that Tom Selleck, getting back to that conversation, Tom Selleck would come across as somebody, yet he would probably like, you could see him like enjoy teaching.
Yeah.
He's almost like a sitcom teacher, right? Like he's almost like a Mr. Cooper or
Mr.
a
Cotter.
head of the class. Yeah, Mr. Cooper. I said Mr. Cooper. Was Mr. Cooper even a teacher?
Well, there's Hanging with Mr. Cooper,
Hanging with
which
Mr.
was
Cooper,
right.
Yeah.
There was a show. Was he a teacher?
Yeah, I think so.
I think he wasn't he like a gym teacher? I don't know. I don't remember.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, good. I just wanted to be sure I didn't. But yeah, I was like Mr. Cotter. So I think that adds something to the character of Indiana Jones that, like you said, Harrison Ford is no one else could really do that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like I don't know that you may take me to task for this. I don't know that I would ever list Harrison Ford as like a great actor.
He doesn't have a lot of range.
Yeah.
Right, like he plays that guy, right? The lovable rogue. That's his character.
Yeah.
Forever.
I think he does that. I think that's probably his best muscle that he flexes. But it is fun to watch him do drama, like the movie Witness. He's great in that. And there's another movie, his personal favorite role, which is a role I really like too, is a movie called The Mosquito Coast.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting role for him because this dude's like a fanatic. Like Harrison Ford playing a fanatic it's interesting. Yeah.
I just heard that movie talked about recently. Sorry, JP, but I just heard Mosquito Coast talked about recently, and it was kind of in the context of the discussion you're all having right now.
Yeah.
And the people who were having that discussion said they think that's when he became locked into what we think and know as Harrison Ford style acting, was because he poured his everything into Mosquito Cove. it wasn't really, so he just kind of was like, okay, whatever, and went with the Harrison Ford we all know and love as being Harrison Ford.
It's a really interesting movie directed by Peter Weir. He directed like Truman Show and a bunch of other really good movies. But like, yeah, he takes like it's a totally different Harrison Ford you're not really used to seeing, and he's also acting opposite of like River Phoenix. It's where he met him and how River Phoenix got to be in Last Crusade. But
I can't see him doing comedy. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I can't see him in like Airplane or it's just not there.
Yeah, well, it would be great to like see him try though. Like I he may not be good at it, but I love to see him try.
I mean, my favorite comedic role, my favorite comedic moment with Harrison Ford is when he was on, I think it was Conan O'Brien, and they bring out Chewbacca, and they have this like back and forth.
You slept with my wife.
Yeah. She was my wife. Like, he does a really good job with that.
Yeah.
And he's got comedic, like the romance comedy comedic roles out there, where you can kind of see a hint of what he would be as a comedic actor. Because like, what's the romantic comedy one he's in?
Are you thinking about Sabrina?
Is that it? Sabrina?
With Greg Kinnear and
I think so.
Julia Margulies, I think it was.
Yeah, but there's glimpses of his comedic. I mean, 6 Days, 7 Nights.
Yeah.
He's hilarious in that, and he's Indiana Jones in that. Like, pretty much. That's a better Indiana Jones sequel than Crystal Skull any day of the week. But yeah, it's just so he's got examples. I could see it, but it would be a stretch. So I would want to see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard because he can be hilarious.
So all right, so let's talk about Indiana Jones, the man himself, and like where he came from. So legend has it is that Indiana Jones is sort of the brainchild of George Lucas himself, coming from his own sort of interests in the paranormal, the supernatural. Also, history, and of course the serial movies that both he and Spielberg grew up with. And I think it was it, what movie did Spielberg had finished? Close Encounters, I think.
Was it Close Encounters or was it
I think
Poltergeist?
No, Poltergeist came after Raiders. I think he just finished Close Encounters, and they were waiting on the box office numbers. And he went to Hawaii with George Lucas.
Yeah.
All it ends up back in Hawaii, Chuck.
All comes back to Hawaii, baby.
They were on vacation there.
Just up and go to Hawaii.
And they were just talking, and Spielberg said, I think it'd be really cool if they let me do a James Bond movie. And apparently he actually tried to do a James Bond movie, but they wouldn't let him for some reason. I think it was like a rights issue. I don't know. Something about an American directing it. Who knows? George Lucas said, well, you don't have to direct a James Bond movie. I have a James Bond character that you can use. And that's when he pitched Indiana Jones. And I think that's interesting because both Spielberg and Lucas have like kind of two completely different approaches to Indiana Jones that are somehow synthesized perfectly in the movies, which is that Spielberg approaches him as sort of like this kind of like James Bond, as like a playboy, control of every situation he's in, again, really cool guy against the world. And Lucas always sort of envisions him as like this really very intelligent and historically aware person. He thought that was enough for to speak for Indiana Jones. But I think they kind of collide in the movies. It's sort of an interesting marriage of the two, because he's definitely both in all the movies.
Yeah, because what's funny is what he comes across as is kind of a grown man-child pretending that he's James Bond when he's actually smart enough and intelligent and talented enough to be James Bond, but it's like he comes across as a grown man playing.
He's not quite in control of everything. He's
he's playing the cool guy, but he's kind of stumbling his way through what's happening and just happening to work.
Right.
So it's cool.
So yeah, they created the character. had their own sort of contributions, created by Lucas. Spielberg had his own contributions, and then they hired Lawrence Kasdan to write the script for Raiders. And so, like, Lawrence Kasdan actually is kind of responsible for most of who Indiana Jones is, because he wrote the script for Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then also there's the legendary outfit, which, a little bit of trivia, the designer of the outfit was Deborah Nadelman. She's the one that kind of took inspiration from a movie called, I think it was like Curse of the Incas, with Charlton Heston. He wears like the leather bomber jacket and a fedora. And also Humphrey Bogart from Treasure of Sierra Madre, also a fedora and sort of like a kind of a ragged, dress shirt that he wears, that sort of linen shirt. A little trivia about Deborah. She also designed another famous jacket, one that we spoke about on this podcast recently, and that is the Thriller jacket.
Ah, I was going to say that.
Yeah, she was married to. Oh, you don't have to mention him. John Landis.
Oh.
See, I feel like that's another thing that's always going to come back to in this podcast is John Landis, and I always had to mention him. But yeah, so yeah, she came up with that, and then of course, legendary comic book artist Jim Steranko was hired to do the concept art for Raiders. I don't know if have you guys ever seen those photos before?
I've seen some,
Yeah.
but it looked just like those like comic books from the 30s.
Yeah, they also
good.
kind of remind me of like G.I. Joe inserts, because didn't Steranko do some G.I. Joe art, Chuck? I don't know.
Oh, I think he did. I feel like G.I. Joe. I think he did the cards.
Yeah.
I feel like he may have done the cards, like the packaging.
Right, because it looks like those. Let me see if I can. I'm gonna try to send one. Cool. All right, so that's a cool little origin story about Indiana Jones. If you weren't familiar. All right, so let's talk about Indiana Jones and why we love him so much. Why? I mean, obviously, we have some affection for the character. We felt where we're talking about him as grown men, and we were probably introduced to him when we were children. So, I'll start with you, Chuck. Why do you like Indiana Jones so much? What is it about him that you find so appealing? This the character.
I really don't know. How to pinpoint that.
No?
No.
When was the first time you watched an Indiana Jones movie?
I probably saw Temple of Doom was probably the first Indiana Jones movie I ever saw, and it was on TV.
Okay.
I can remember I had to be like 5 or 6 years old. It was at the duplex that my mom and I lived in. And the only thing that I remember from that time, and full confession, I did not, because I have a newborn child, I did not have the opportunity to revisit the movies for this conversation, except for the fact that I watched Crystal Skull not too long ago. So, but I have seen Raiders a few times, but I've seen Last Crusade like just so many times. Yeah. But but the only thing I remember from Temple of Doom is, like eyeballs in the soup and like monkey brain and all that kind of stuff from that scene.
Temple of Doom really is the most like culturally appropriate, the most authentic depiction of Indian culture I've ever seen portrayed on cinema.
It is true. It is true. I mean, every Indian restaurant I've ever eaten at looks just like that situation. I don't mean that. I feel like in this internet climate, I need to add a little disclaimer that like, I'm kidding.
Not many people know that the voodoo doll came from India.
Yeah, not Haiti. So but my really fond memories of Indiana Jones, and I think really the first movie that I can remember like actually engaging with was Last Crusade, because I saw it in theaters. Right?
Yeah, me too.
1989. What a time for movies.
Oh yeah.
And I think what I really gravitated to in that was the blend of like action and humor, and just the scale of like excitement and all that. And I always really liked history, even when I was little. Mm-hmm. And so Indiana Jones and that, like his engagement with like history and all of that. Like there was a period of time where I wanted to be an archaeologist because of Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And I mean, but it was like brief. I was like, like 7 or 8, where I was like, yay, archaeology. But as a character, I don't know. Like that's really tough. I did also watch the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles a lot.
Yeah.
When they were out, when I was a kid. It was actually how I was introduced to Teddy Roosevelt as a historical figure, who I just like fell in love with because of Indiana Jones.
Huh.
And I think if my interest in Teddy Roosevelt is somehow like my vicarious way of like blending into like Indiana Jones type stuff, it's probably just sort of like this sort of classical masculine thing where he's not overbearing, like mean,
yeah,
but like he's confident,
right,
and
courageous,
and but also like you can tell there's a tender side there.
Mm-hmm.
Like Teddy Roosevelt was a conservationist. He cared about the natural world. It wasn't just about subduing the natural world. It was about preserving it. And I think those qualities are kind of there with Indy. He's going to punch stuff. He's going to blow stuff up, but he's also going to make sure that this artifact is taken care of. And
right.
he seems to care some degree about like the cultures and stuff where they come from. It's not just like, we're going to take this, from you savages, right? There's like a, he's preserving it because other like powers are trying to get it, and he wants it to be safe.
Right, which is like what you're kind of perfectly describing like the sort of the crux of Temple of Doom, where he's kind of confronting his idea of fortune and glory and sort of giving it up.
Yeah, and in Temple, they first get to the village, he's like, I'd love to help, but I'm not interested. Like, I want to go home. I gotta get back to my life. And then he finds out, the kids are missing and all this. You can see him kind of go, okay, well that sucks. Yeah. And then they go, oh, but our Sankara stone is missing. And he's like, oh, hang on. You didn't say there was a religious stone. That's a different story. Yeah. Now I'm in.
Shiva Linga, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, what about you, buddy? I mean, I feel like you may have a few things to say. Is that
a few things to say? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just listening. It's one of those times again where I feel like I forgot I'm on the podcast and I'm enjoying listening to it instead. But yeah, the character. I mean, I don't know what else I got to say other than what everybody's already said.
Well, I just want to know what it means to you personally.
He was probably the biggest part of my childhood next to James Bond. Which is why my son's name is Bond and not Indiana, which I'm sure he's very grateful for.
You could have named him Bond Indiana James, but that's...
and that, no, too much. But yeah, he was... Well, let me think about it this way. We're going to travel back in time with me to the 80s when we were discovering him, and probably when all of us were getting into Indiana Jones and running around and pretending to be him. And then when I was like 7 or 8, just like Chuck, I was convinced I was going to be an archaeologist. The difference is I was convinced of that until Jurassic Park changed it to paleontologist. So we're going to travel back in time here. So I'm going to... Mike's going to be so glad he joined us for this episode, because Chuck's thrown out all these comments about, I'm sure he's so excited to be on that one. I'm going to remove the discussion about gender binary thinking and go back to the 80s when you were told to be a man. Mm-hmm. To me, like, Tom Hanks is the man your mom wanted you to grow up to be, and Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones is the man you wanted to grow up and be. Like, he's the rough, tough, but he cared. He's the guy who you're like, man, he won't take crap from anybody. He'll beat you up, but
he smells like Old Spice.
We just watched the episode of New Girl last night that my wife and I are obsessed with. We just randomly watch it for no reason, where he's like, it smells like Shakespeare. Shakespeare drank brandy and rode leather, and anyway. But yeah, he was the tough guy who had a heart. So he was the guy who you're like, that's who I want to be. I want to be the tough guy who could take on everybody, who could like take the world on. He can take Nazis on by himself. Come on, like Nazis and evil, like heart-ripping people, and apparently there's like aliens or something. But anyway, he can like take on Nazis, but secretly you're also like, but like he's also cool because he cares, and I want to like care. But you didn't tell people that part of it. You just wore the whip on your belt and whatever jacket you could find and ran around pretending to beat up Nazis. But you wanted to be him completely. Like Indiana Jones was, he's James Bond level cool, but more heart, more caring, more empathy toward people.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know, that's what the character to me was like, the Hollywood equivalent of, that's not just I want to be Indiana Jones when I grow up. No, it's like that's the person I want to be when I grow up. The guy you can count on, but also the guy you can't make do anything. The guy who every decision he makes is going to be based on what he believes and why he believes it, but you know he's got your back in the end also. I wanted to be that guy. So that's what he means to me, is, yeah, it's just that was the epitome of being a manly man, was Indiana Jones.
Okay, great. No, great answer, Matt. That's a good answer. Mike, how about you?
For me, it was the mix of brains and brawn, right? When we were kids, you know, like Matt said, every man was a man's man, kind of thing. And the intelligent ones were the nerds, where I'll just sit over here and I'll do this, I'll read this book and I'll tell you what to do, and then the other guy goes out and punches people in the face. With Indiana Jones, it was, he couldn't get to the point where he could punch people in the face without the intelligence behind it, right? He had to do the research. He had to read about this and read about that, and he had to have all this knowledge, and that led him on these grand, huge adventures where he happened to punch people in the face. So for me, that was an interesting mix. I hadn't seen that before, right? I had seen, the closest I guess I had come was like maybe Captain Kirk, right?
Yeah.
That was about as close as I got, and it was really interesting. And as a kid, I was like, yes. So being smart is the way to do all the cool things, and that really, like, it made me want to be an archaeologist too, right? Until Jurassic Park, but Jurassic Park did make me want to be a paleontologist. Made me want to be a geneticist. Weirdly,
Nice.
I wanted to be.
I've heard that
I
one,
wanted to be Doctor. I wanted to be Dr. Henry Wu.
You just wanted to be the one responsible for the end of the world. That's fine.
Yeah. Somebody's got to be. Somebody's.
Hey, can I say thank you for you actually get Kirk?
Yeah.
Because so many people like to characterize Kirk as just like whiz bang.
That's Han Solo, basically.
Right. They forget the fact that he's depicted in the show as like super smart, actually, and he's very studied. I mean, like, they describe him in the original series as being a walking stack of books.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was funny because when you said Kirk, I was like, he's like Kirk. That's Kirk. Kirk is in Indiana Jones, and you said it like as I was thinking it. So
Kirk beat the Kobayashi Maru. He built a cannon to defeat the Gorn. I mean, come on, you got to be smart to do those things. But for me, that's what it was. That was that interesting mix that really appealed to me as a kid.
Like, I have to say something that Mike talked about, the brain and brawn thing, and he mentioned, you know, like there was always the nerds and then the tough guy. And how Indiana Jones was the two of those brought together. And as he's talking that, I couldn't help but think, I even love the way that we are introduced to him as, you know, Indiana Jones. The scene is opening this action adventure, whatever. And then we are immediately like thrown for a loop when in the next scene, he's kind of like the Clark Kent to Superman.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the glasses on, the bow tie,
gray suit,
the suit, and it's just like mega nerd. And then what the whole movie does perfectly, if I could talk, is show you that the quote-unquote super guy is also the mega nerd. Like, there's no difference because he's still bumbling around, he's still nerdy. Like, when he interacts with a woman, he becomes like a Like, it's great.
That's the part I wanted to point out. Despite the fact that he's a nerd, all the students still think he's hot.
Yeah.
Because the student that has the "love you" on her eyelids.
Yeah, on her eye. That used to freak me out.
But
and the one guy who leaves an apple for him, that's kind of a weird. Like, I don't even remember that part in Raiders.
It was the 30s, man. It was a weird time.
I think one thing too about it is, you know, as you get older, you start wondering about what do your teachers do, like. Yeah. On their off time, right? You kind of have these wonders, like, what do they do? Are they just always teaching? And so the idea that your teacher is like out doing all this international travel and like saving the world, like that's kind of a cool idea.
Oh yeah, totally. I love it.
Yeah, instead of like working the garden center at Lowe's.
Yeah.
Here's a rabbit hole you could go down. You've got Clark Kent and Superman, right? And you've got, Batman and Bruce Wayne. Which of Indiana Jones' adventurer and Indiana Jones' professor, which is the real one and which is the mask?
Interesting.
Hashtag deep thoughts for your Wednesday.
Yeah. Well.
That to me. Sorry, I got to answer. That to me is what I was saying about. That's what I was saying about how he's like a man-child playing James Bond. Is the adventurer who's got it all together is the act, and when you actually get to follow him, what you find out is he can be the adventurer, he can do it all, but it's all as he bumbles his way through it as the nerd. Like, he's figuring it out as he goes, but somehow is able to pull off the adventure stuff that, I mean, if you watch the movie, what Harrison Ford does great is express acting in a way where Indiana Jones is constantly surprising himself.
Yeah.
Like, he does something
That's
and
true.
he'll have this look on his face like, that worked, or this look on his face like, I'm still here. And then the I'm done with it, old man, and he wasn't even old then, but even that comes out, and love it.
Yeah,
like,
and that's
the classic scene, the sword.
Right,
Perfect.
and that's something Harrison Ford brought to the character as well. I heard Steven Spielberg talk about this, saying that like his great physical acting, he's like, he wanted to play Indiana Jones not as a superhero, but as someone who gets hurt when you get punched in the face. Like, you feel it when he's dragged across the ground when he's holding onto the truck. Like, you feel the pain when he gets shot in the arm. He winces, like, oh, he grits his teeth. He's like, you feel it when he's hit. He's in pain. He's not like James Bond. It's just like, straightening his jacket as he's saving the world.
Yeah, well, and side note, that's why Daniel Craig became my favorite, because he expresses that kind of stuff into the James Bond character. But yes, carry on.
But Mike,
Pierce Brosnan did that in The Tank in GoldenEye. The best James Bond moment in the whole franchise, as far as I'm concerned.
You see, all the other James Bonds are all the other James. No, one sentence. All the other James Bonds are like the height of cool. Daniel Craig is the first one that's like tough.
Yeah,
like you'd be afraid of him if he's coming, but he's still cool. But you'd be afraid of him if he was coming after you. The other guys, you'd be like, "Can I hang out with you? Like, can I hang by you? Because maybe I'll look cooler by being by you." But anyway, that was it. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Well, Mike, if there's anything else you want to add to, how you feel? Okay, cool. I'd like to say my piece as well before we start talking about the movies themselves.
Nobody cares about PvP.
Sure. Okay, we'll just moderate. So, like everybody else, I was introduced to Indiana Jones as a child. I think it was Temple of Doom. That was the VHS copy that I had and wore the hell out. And then Raiders is something I watched a lot growing up as well. But I had a really crazy experience with Raiders of the Lost Ark, in that I had seen it many times, and I also saw Last Crusade in theaters with my dad. That was actually my very first movie experience that I remember, that I can recall. I'd seen like Disney movies and stuff, like cartoons with my sisters and stuff, but my dad took me to see Last Crusade. That was like the moment I saw my first movie, if that makes sense. But I had a crazy experience with Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that I'd kind of grown up watching it. I know all these movies beat for beat. I was 19 years old, living on my own in Orlando, and this is when I was going to Valencia at the same time Chuck was, and
But we didn't know each other.
right. And the AMC at Pleasure Island started showing midnight movies and their original 35 millimeter prints. And I started going to those screenings because, you know, this is the first time I've ever seen like old movies on a big screen before. And I'd seen a good number of them. I saw Spaceballs, I saw Aliens, Beetlejuice, and I think the original, the 1989 Batman. And those were all like fun. And like, you know, I'm definitely already obsessed with those movies anyway. I grew up with those movies too. And seeing on the big screen was fun. But when they showed Raiders of the Lost Ark, something just, it was just like a completely, it's like I'd never seen the movie before in my life. Like you know, at this time I'd only been watching him on VHS, you know, on this little box, but seeing it in 35 millimeter on this giant screen, to the point where I could like, you can like see Belloc swallow the fly, which is something I'd never seen before. And like when that happened, everyone in the crowd like started laughing. I don't think they'd ever seen it either. But I don't know. It was like you kind of realize like, oh my gosh, like I get this movie now. Like this is what it was. This is what it's for. This is what Indiana Jones is for. It's a movie, and it was just like it was like a religious experience for me, because I totally took on like a totally different view of who Indiana Jones was. It wasn't just like this cool guy who could like take on the world. It's like I started seeing him as like a character, and I started seeing the movies as cinema, and started taking Spielberg as sort of like this, as like an auteur. And I think that's where my relationship with Indiana Jones really kind of took form, was not when I was so much a kid. I mean, I always loved him as a kid, but when I was like in college, I was like, I want to be Indiana Jones. So, and you know, Matt and Chuck, they knew me in college. When I went to my very first mission trip to China, that's when I started to sort of think of myself as like, I think I'm doing it. Like, I think I'm starting to understand how I can be this kind of person, but like not like in a sort of weird fanboy way where like I'm living in a fantasy. And it's also why I started wearing this bandana. That's why I'm wearing it for this episode, is that the bandana sort of became like my fedora. But so that's just kind of like how he sort of inspired me. And my college years were sort of made up of like, you know, what would Indy do? But not, I know it sounds like a crazy fanboy stuff, and I'm trying not to be. But there was something about it that I feel like I kind of needed in my life, because I never really characterized myself as like a courageous person, as an adventurous person. And I think the reason why I love Indiana Jones so much is that part of it, what you guys have said about brains and brawn, that masculinity, that's all part of it. But there's another aspect of it that I really like, that I think Spielberg is responsible for. And that is his sort of sense of wonder. You know, whenever he sees an artifact or discovers an artifact, he's like super excited. You know, he's not like, just like, you know, I feel like any other kind of action hero would be like, oh yeah, that's the Ark of the Covenant. Like, let's get in and get out of here. Let's go on the move. But like, you know, the first relic we see him find in Raiders, he's like all wide-eyed, and it's like he's like beaming. He's being real careful with it. And then also like when he's down in the Well of Souls, not Well of Souls. What's that? City of Tanis, right?
In the map room.
The map room.
Tanis?
Yeah, the map room of Tanis, and the sun points the direction of the Ark. Like he just starts beaming, and that's also when the lights go.
The look on his face is incredible.
Yeah, I love it.
That scene.
And it's like that for the rest of the movies. He's like having like he's going through all these. He's like getting beat up, but when he gets that relic, he's like super stoked, right? And it's that idea of like, I feel like, you know, I think like the crux of toxic masculinity is like to not show any emotion. And like Indiana Jones shows a lot of emotion. He really emotes. He lets you know when he's in pain. He lets you know when he's happy, when he's in love. Even expresses himself to his dad, how like, you know, disappointed he is and how he treated him and stuff. That's something I kind of really latched onto as well, which is to like not be afraid to be impressed. So that's why I liked Indiana Jones so much, if that makes any sense.
It does.
My answer just sounded terrible now.
No, all of your answers were great.
I thought he was really cool.
I'm sure there's some fun unpacking we could do, JP, with the comparison of a artifact hunter, white male, upper class guy going into other cultures and taking their artifacts, and mission trips.
Yeah, I know. That's another episode.
It is another episode. Can I just say, just in that vein, one thing that I remember from that trip to China. So Mike, when JP came back from this trip to China, we moved into an apartment together, and so we signed the lease. He goes to China, and then comes back. So it was this kind of interesting thing. Like, we knew we had this other roommate out there just sort of existing, and we were waiting for him. But when he gets back, one of the first things he does is he made a movie. He made film while he was over there, and he shows us videos of all the stuff that he did in China. And one thing that sticks out to me that whole time, and JP, for years I wrestle, I deal with this. Oh
no!
One of the girls on the trip. You guys were at the Blue Temple, right? Is that what it's called? The
Heavenly Temple.
The Heavenly Temple, right? And you're taking,
Temple
of Heaven. There you go. If my wife was here, she could tell me what it was in Chinese, because she's she speaks Chinese and lived there for a while. But you're showing it off, and you're showing off, all this the beautiful, just artwork that's done in this thing. I can't remember who it was on the trip, but exactly.
We don't have to name names.
You don't have to name names. But you know where I'm going with this.
Uh-huh.
She says, I can't believe this was all built for nothing.
Yeah. I'm admiring it with my camera, this is amazing,
Ouch.
beautiful artwork, and I just kind of slowly pan to her, and she's like, "Too bad it's all for nothing." I'm like,
yeah.
That's not what Indiana Jones would say.
Yeah. He would not say that.
No.
In fact, he knows that the Hindu deities, the Judeo-Christian God, and aliens all exist. So he knows these things for fact.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, okay, yeah, that's funny. I do think about that a lot too, actually. So okay, cool. Now that we've done that, now let's talk about. Oh, good, we're good on time. I thought we would talk about the individual films. So Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite of all of them, and it may have something to do with my religious experience of seeing it on the big screen. I don't know, but also I think out of all of them, it is the one that is the most, I want to say, artful, and that Spielberg's not just his skill, but his talent and his artfulness are on display. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that so Raiders was kind of different so far in his oeuvre. Is that how you say it? Oeuvre. And that he didn't go over budget. This is the first time he's never gone over budget. With Jaws, he was assigned 55 days of shooting. He went shooting 158 days, which was a miserable experience. And that's kind of what happened with all of his movies leading up to Raiders. Raiders was the first time he came in under budget and under time. And a lot of that was because he got rid of what's called coverage. Coverage is when you let's say me and Chuck are having a conversation. I get a shot of me from over Chuck's shoulder. I get another shot of me from his POV. I get a master shot, just the two of us talking. I go from over my shoulder, whatever, all these different shots. He took all of that out, and just sort of he focused solely on concept art and storyboards. So basically, instead of having the conversation between Indiana Jones and Belloc after he thinks Marion has died, that was all done in a few shots. They didn't do that over and over again where they kept repeating it over and over again for different angles. Everything had a storyboard, so everything was perfectly planned out meticulously. Every shot has a storyboard, and that's not actually normal for shooting a film. At least back then it wasn't. So because of that, the movie is very tight. Everything that has to happen happens. There's nothing superfluous. Although a lot of people make the argument that the airfield scene is like doesn't add anything. I think it adds coolness, and that's all that's important. So I think it's Spielberg when he was like still kind of like flexing those artistic muscles. You know, he was still trying to be an auteur. And I think the sequels, while I think they're good and they're fun and they're entertaining, he's kind of like, it feels like he's sort of eased into them a little bit. Like everyone else sort of eased into it. They kind of know what they have to do. They know what beats, you know, it's like say your line, hit the mark, and then we'll move on. But Raiders, I mean, he's just doing some really cool stuff with like shadows and lighting, and the editing is really cool. The sound design is immaculate. I mean, I love the sound effects. Like I love the punch sound effect in the Indiana Jones movies because it doesn't sound like a punch at all. It just sounds like, apparently it's like celery breaking or something. I don't know.
Yeah. The punches and the gunshots are always way over the top. It's so good.
Even like I think like Willie slaps Indiana Jones just like that, and it's like a psh, like glass shattering. But I think Raiders is the most artful of them all, and it really shows Spielberg like in his prime, when he was young, like after he had made Jaws, before he made Jurassic Park, and before he tried to do stuff like, you know, he did like Empire of the Sun and The Color Purple, where he's like, oh, he's trying to win an Oscar now. But yeah, so that's why Raiders is my favorite. And and Chuck mentioned earlier that I had done a bunch of posts on Instagram recently. I had some whiskey to celebrate some harvesting, and I just decided to turn to Raiders, and I just started like screenshotting all of these scenes from Raiders, just like posting, oh, there, this is why this scene is perfect. You see the shadows, and then they dissect here, and this character stays in the shadow the whole time. It was fun. And like I thought it was way more in depth than I thought it was, but like I was a little tipsy, and you always think you're like way smarter. Then I look back at it and I was like, oh, this is not that. It's actually pretty like film school. Like
I like, when it comes to Raiders, I think I agree with you. It's the one that feels the most like a pulp comic.
Yeah. Like
it feels like something Meebus could have drawn. Mm-hmm. You know, like not that Meebus drew that kind of stuff, but you know what I mean? That you could almost, it feels like a newspaper serial.
Yeah. You
know, the image that pops in my head is the shot of when they're lifting up the Ark, and you know that it's just made with a cardboard cutout. But to do that in order to get that flat shadow to really make it defined,
the beautiful gold that surrounds it and stuff.
Yeah, I think it just hits that. It's very classic, and yeah, it does have that. You're, like you said, in seeing on the big screen, right? You're seeing a movie, you know.
Also, one more thing, one more shot that I love in the movie. That's his famous. What he's famous for are the oneers, right? Where he does a single take in one shot, which is the drinking contest between Marion and the one person from the tavern. I never noticed until I saw it on the big screen that was one shot. I thought it was like super edited, but it's not. It's all done in one shot, that whole contest. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of like talent you see in this movie that I feel like is a little absent from the other films. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because I can't think of, like, I'll just go ahead and say my favorite one is Last Crusade. But I don't know that Last Crusade has like iconic shots that I can think of quite like, you know, him seeing the gold idol for the first time in Raiders, or you know the using the thing to see to shine a light onto the location of the Ark, or even when they lift the Ark up. I mean, there's just these very, you know, and I mean, in part, I will admit that some of that might be peppered by my, you know, experiences of going to MGM Studios as a kid, and these are the things that are like thrown in your face about this movie.
Right.
But I definitely think I agree with you on that, and that's what I think of when I think of Raiders. I just think of the cinematography of it, and then the other piece is I can remember as a kid when I realized that it was talking about the Ark of the Covenant, and to see like, ooh, a real Hollywood movie is sort of affirming my religion. Like, that's cool, right? And the idea of like the curses in the Bible and all that stuff are being taken seriously, and you know, like the knowledge of the Bible is treated as fact. Like that was a cool thing for me as a Baptist growing up to see that.
Right. Matt, how about you? Raiders of the Lost Ark. Go.
It's good.
You want to talk about the epic stunt spectacular instead?
It is, yeah.
You know I
the,
will.
Or the adaptation.
Oh yeah, the adaptation.
But
that was fun.
But let me give my quick for real. But basically, you guys already said it. But yeah, when I think of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is unquestionably my favorite, but part of that is just because it's iconic. And the reason it is everything you're talking about, though. It was a Hollywood blockbuster film of action and ghost angel things and Nazis and this guy running around with a whip and a sword and comedy and romance. And it was shot on a scale that was like watching, like Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
Like he's standing opening the thing with that thunder lightning storm taking place behind that scene. Since I was a kid, blows me away. The sunsets over the dunes and stuff while they're there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when they're digging for the ark.
Yeah,
that's such a beautiful shot. So beautiful.
It's just those are the images. This movie was massive in its scale. It created. You always hear about, they created a world that was so big, or they created a world that was so small. But this, it opened the world up in a way where it was like you wanted to go out and explore, because this movie made the world look so big, so grand, so amazing and spectacular, that the awesome action and comedy and fun that's taking place in front of it, looking back, it was almost secondary to the shots we're talking about.
Yeah.
The images that are burned into your head of, even when it starts off literally small and close in, the first shot of that back with the hat on, and the whip on his belt, and it's just, we knew before we saw his face, this guy's my hero. Like, he walked on the screen and I'm like, I want to be him.
Yeah, and he's established first as like a silhouette. So like we're familiar with the silhouette first before we know who the man is.
Yeah, it's just, and the movie carries that theme throughout it. You're talking about the shadows, the silhouette on the wall of the ark, the silhouette of them digging up the ark, and the thing. It's like it I'll use another nerd reference. It's like Batman's whole discussion and Batman Begins about how they don't need a man, they need it's an idea, it's a symbol. Indiana Jones was introduced to us as a symbol of a man before a face was given to it, and throughout the movie it was constantly reiterated that this is somebody larger than just this guy. He is like the epitome of what you want to be, the smart guy, the tough guy, the adventurer, the explorer, the lover and romancer. But constantly throughout the movie we just get these images that cut Harrison Ford, not in a great way, cut him out of it completely and put it on a scale so much bigger, because you've got this massive world but his silhouette fits it.
Right.
And the dogs agree. Release the hounds.
I'm sorry. And that's the thing. That's another thing I realized is that that's how Marion is reintroduced to Indiana Jones. She doesn't react to Indiana Jones. She reacts to his shadow.
Yeah.
On the wall.
For me, Raiders is I'm not as up to date on technical film aspects as say JP, but for me, Raiders is a perfect film. All the things we already talked about, right? Like the lighting, the cinematography, the acting, everything is just perfect. It is a perfect film from that perspective. The thing I liked about it the most, I think, is that intro that Matt just alluded to. You see Indiana Jones and the music. Usually, when you get a hero intro, the music goes up and it goes grand, and it's like, this is the hero. But when you see Indiana Jones from the back, the music goes dark. It's almost like, are we meeting the villain right now, right? And then it just turns into this super cool dude.
Yeah. And
then he goes from super cool dude to bumbling guy getting chased by the Jovitos running through the field, right? Start the plane, Jock, right?
Right, yeah.
Scared of snakes. And then it's like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like, am I supposed to think this guy is cool or not? Or it kind of throws you for a little bit of a loop. But yeah, it's every time I've watched that film, it's not like I've seen it for the first time. That's a little too cliche, but every time it's like, this is such a good movie.
Yeah.
So good, right? Definitely the one I'm going to let my kids watch first.
Yeah.
Maybe minus the face melty scenes. Maybe I'll save them that.
Yeah,
we got to talk about that for a minute. Like,
well, yeah, because so my kids really kind of want to watch these movies. Which, by the way, my younger son Ford thinks that it's Indy and the Jones. Because we've taken it to the Stunt Spectacular in Hollywood Studios, and like they're super into the idea of watching these movies, Indy and the Jones, and so we wanted to watch Raiders. Both Ken and I think that he can probably handle Raiders, but the only thing I'm like, oh, hold on now, like that face melting scene at the end. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if what I could do, Mike, is what we could do with our kids is we could say like, oh, we have to do what Indy says, like look away, like
that's good. Yeah.
When you saw the movie, everybody had to look away in the theater. That's how you watch the movie.
That's a great idea.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm just gonna scar my children. I'm just gonna hit play on that scene and pause it and be like, "What do you guys think?"
I used to.
By the way,
yeah.
If you don't listen to mommy and daddy, this is what happens.
I have to say, because Chuck was talking about his kids, and it took me a long time to get my little 3-year-old son to quit calling it Indian Joe.
Oh no, that's
Tom Sawyer.
That's a
yeah.
That's a carton of cigarettes from like 1920s probably.
Yeah.
Indian Joe.
So anyway, just had to
yeah.
Well, Matt, really quick, that makes me think, Matt, were you part? I can't remember if I shared this with you or if it was just JP and our friend Keelan. And I'm saying our friend Keelan for the benefit of Mike and for other people who who listen to the show. Mike, criticized by Father Fun by referring to Keelan as my friend Keelan all the time. There's a whole backstory, and I don't get into it all.
We all know Keelan. Carry on.
Yeah. So Charlie watched Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and they've been like sword fighting outside, and he makes sound effects like little boys do, but he's making the sound of the swords hitting, and he goes ching chang chong ching chang chong chang. And it didn't help that we live in a predominantly Japanese neighborhood in Hawaii, but it also didn't help that he was doing that at the Disney store with a Mulan sword surrounded by Asian kids the other day.
No. Oh boy.
Children.
Wow.
Well,
your son can just come hang out with Indian Joe, and everything will be fine.
All right, so let's move on to Temple of Doom. Kind of a controversial pick. Before Crystal Skull came out. This was sort of the controversial one before we had a fourth movie, where people were the big debate was
according to Mike, allegedly a fourth movie.
Yeah, exactly. The big debate was like, does Temple of Doom rule as much as Raiders and Last Crusade? And I kind of see. I'm gonna jump into it. Rewatching it recently, I think it's entertaining. I think it's fun. But a lot of the set pieces and a lot of what happens in that movie are actually like holdovers from unused ideas from Raiders. Like the eating, the very first one where they're in Shanghai, that was supposed to be in Raiders. The food that they're eating, all the bugs and like animals and stuff, that was supposed to be in Raiders. The minecart chase, and what else? I think that was about it. And maybe some other things, I don't remember. But there's that. It kind of feels like, it's like stuff that didn't really work in Raiders. It doesn't quite work for me here. I don't love the minecart chase. I think it looks kind of phony. I could just because we watch things in HD now. Because like now the Indiana Jones miniature they use looks like the voodoo doll that they use earlier in the movie. I also don't think like Harrison Ford has like a really firm grasp on the character in this one. He's mugging the camera a lot in this one. Like he's really hamming it up, playing up the comedy, which sometimes lands, and I laugh at a lot of parts still. But sometimes it's like, this is kind of corny. Like the water part, right, where he stops in Minecraft. I keep saying Minecraft. Minecart. I definitely don't love it as much as Raiders. I don't think the artfulness is there, and I definitely think they're sort of settle into what Indiana Jones movie should be, to put butts in seats. But there's some good things. I love Short Round. I think he actually might be my favorite character, aside from like Marion, who's my favorite character aside from Indiana Jones. Short Round, I think he steals every scene he's in. Willie is well, I don't know. I don't think her. I think she's supposed to be comedic relief. I don't think I don't think it lands all the time. I know what Spielberg's trying to do. He's trying to do like a screwball comedy thing with scenes between him and between her and Harrison Ford. Like the part where they're chasing the diamond and the antidote, and the opening scene is definitely like, I could definitely see that being like in a Marx Brothers movie.
Yeah.
Or like Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn joint, like Bringing a Baby. A lot of they're definitely branching out to like other parts of Hollywood cinema. Like there's a musical opening number, that sort of vaudevillian kind of humor of like chasing the stuff in China. Gunga Din was a movie that was kind of heavily influenced the film, which is a movie that stars a white guy in blackface, or I guess I should say an Indian face. Watch at your own discretion. That's kind of where they got the idea to use like the thuggy Colton stuff. But overall, fun movie. But not like a masterwork in any sense. I want to know what you guys think. Who wants to go first?
So for me,
I'll just say I literally have not seen it since I was like 6.
Really? That's kind of
yeah.
I watched it 2 days ago, so it's fresh.
Oh, okay, so what do you think, Mike?
Out of the, called the original trilogy, I guess. Temple is my least favorite.
Yeah.
It's still great, but it's just not up to the caliber of the others. It's an odd movie, right? Because it goes from, like JP said, it starts off as a musical, right? And then it kind of goes into a little bit of vaudeville slapstick, and then it just pivots right into just like gross out horror, right? With that
it gets
dude
dark.
ripping another dude's heart out, and like child labor and child slavery, and monkey brains. It's like, oh, what is
Indiana
this?
Jones
like,
turns evil for a minute. Like
yeah.
Slap Short Round.
Yeah, it's an odd one. Short Round, I agree. I was really, really hoping Short Round was going to show up in Crystal Skull, even just as like a brief cameo would have been just so good.
We got Shia LaBeouf. Sorry, carry on.
For Temple, it really is like just an hour and a half of Kate Capshaw screaming.
Yeah, I know.
That's kind of how I've always put it in my head, right? It's like, I get it. You're the
fish out of water.
The helpless woman character that Indiana Jones has to save. Like, I get it, right? But it does have its comedic moments, right? With when they're in the room and the spikes are coming down, right? And coming up out of the floor and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's looking through the hole, going, "We are going to die." Just this little tiny little bits of comedy in it that were really, really good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Matt?
I love it, and I'm not ashamed to say I love that movie. I am ashamed of some of the stuff in it that didn't age well, but overall, I absolutely love it. And now let me say why. Raiders is a different level of movie. I mean, it just is. Like what we've already talked about, what we discussed. It's like historic. It belongs in the pantheon of greats forever, and
it belongs in a museum.
But
we were all thinking.
But Temple is the movie I wanted when I was a kid to follow Raiders, because you introduced me to these massive ideas of masculinity and history and loyalty and all that stuff. Now I just want to see him have fun. So put him in all the crazy adventure that you can. And I think it fits too with, we know that the Indiana Jones character kind of comes out of that concept of like the serials and things like that. The old comics back in the day in the newspapers, like The Phantom. And there's elements of like a Phantom and things like Raiders of the Lost Ark. You've got the the adventurer who's out keeping the world safe. The Shadow is totally Temple of Doom. The the dark arts that are influencing it's so you have these classic concepts that kids have been reading on the funny pages since way back in the day, and now this one character is able to kind of live those out. So although yes, from a movie point of view, from a cinematography, you can't even hold it up to Raiders. It's just you shouldn't. And I don't think they set out to make Raiders. I think they set out to make another entry into their serial comic strip that we were going to be reading and watching and going with. And I think they nailed it in a way that I still to this day, I love it. I mean, it's cheesy, it's corny, it's super fun. It still has parts of it that are incredibly great. And overall, it's just a good, fun experience. It is a movie that you have fun watching. Even when you don't want to watch because they're like eating things and ripping out hearts. But
it's like following up Wrath of Khan, right? Search of Spock. That's its only problem, really, is that I've had to follow Wrath of Khan. It's still a fun movie.
Yeah, this is the Star Trek V of the series.
Ooh.
Oh, actually, but that might be Crystal Skull.
Maybe, yeah.
But this movie, trivia I learned the other night, this is the movie that introduced the PG-13.
Yeah.
Because they gave it an R, and they fought back against that. And like, well, the only other thing we have is PG, and it ain't PG. And Spielberg lobbied for the PG-13, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, that is cool. But I do want to add, like I did say earlier, like the great thing about this one was that he kind of learned to let go of fortune and glory, which is sort of the point of it. And I do appreciate that. I appreciate that he has they don't sacrifice an arc, but they do stay in line that like even though Indy doesn't ultimately get the artifact, he does get something else. Which in this one, he learns that it's not all about fortune and glory, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a prequel too, right? Like,
which I think
a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, I think that was a weird thing for them to do it because I think this works fine as a sequel. Like,
yeah,
I don't know why they made it a prequel. I don't really get it. I never really looked into it.
I just realized none of the Indiana Jones movies end with him getting the artifact.
Well, technically, I mean he gets the Ark. He just doesn't keep it. That's
what I'm saying. Like he.
Yeah. You're right. Though
the only thing Brody ever gets for the museum is the stuff he finds at the beginning.
Yeah, the Cross of Coronado on Last Crusade. That's the only thing that's the only relic he keeps out of all the movies.
That's true.
Well, and I think though that's also the character is what we learned from the guy who we're introduced to his back with the whip. And I know the whole prequel, sequel, I'm not having that discussion. The guy we were introduced, the back of him going in to collect this little idol that he's trying to run off to take for himself. He wants to preserve it for history, but that's for him. The movie then shifts to a guy who takes the Ark because of the right reasons and so is willing to let it go, which is the same thing that happens in Temple of Doom. He doesn't go take it so that he can have the glory of holding on to it. It's, no, this belongs to these people and it needs to go back to them. So he never ends up with what he goes to take because he never went. I mean, he eventually learns he's not going there to take it in the first place. He believes these are important for a reason, and because of that, there's places they should be that are not with him, that are not his to decide. Right. And the Ark, let's be honest, it should be hidden away.
Right, and it's a classic case of a want versus need when you establish a character in any movie, right? He wants the Ark, but he needs Marion. He wants the stones, but he needs to learn that like there's like a culture attached to these things. And in Last Crusade, he wants the Grail, but he needs to reestablish his relationship with his father. So it's a classic case, with that. I think they pull it off really well. So I don't know if you had anything else you want to say about Temple of Doom, Chuck, before we move on to Last Crusade.
Haven't seen it since I was 3.
Okay, let's talk about Last Crusade, and I want you to start, Chuck, because I know you said you said this is one that you've seen a lot, so I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, I've seen. So Last Crusade, I love. Like I said, I saw it in theaters. What is there not to love? Sean Connery.
Oh, yes, of course.
Throwback
to this being a James Bond type
right.
character. Yeah.
I love the relationship between him and his dad. Like, I think that's great. I'm sure someone could play armchair psychology, and the fact that the guy who never met his dad loves a movie that is about like dads reconnecting, or a dad reconnecting with his son. But I love.
I'm just kidding.
But I love. Obviously it's Jesus. It's a Jesus related movie.
New Testament to Lost Ark, Old Testament.
Right. It's a fun movie. It gives us a sense of Indiana Jones as a kid. You find out that his name is actually it's an affectation, which I think is great. I love that it's. I don't know. Like, getting into specifics, I just enjoy it. Like, I think that's really what it comes down to. I enjoy the movie a lot. It's one I feel the most fondness for when it comes to, if I'm going to watch an Indiana Jones, if I'm going to watch Raiders, I'm in the mindset to watch cinema. Mm-hmm. But if I'm looking for a good time, I'm probably going to watch Last Crusade.
Right.
And there's, the stuff at the end, right? Seeing Petra at the end, which started a kind of an obsession with the city of with Petra with me, to see it in this movie. I'd love to go. I missed out, Mike, when I went to the Holy Land in 2010. They did have a leg that would take you to Petra, but there was some political strife going on, and so we were unable to do that. So I missed out on my chance to go there. That whole sequence at the end, the whole solving the puzzles, very Legend of Zelda kind of thing.
Yeah, what was it? The breath of God, the word of God, and the path of God.
Yeah. And I think probably my thing that I love the most in it is, and I think it's beautifully theological, which is they get to the room full of grails, and the assumption that the most jeweled one is the real one, but Indy is one who figures out Jesus is a humble dude. And historically, they wouldn't have, because they didn't know. They wouldn't have had all of that at the time. They didn't know that they were that there was a momentous moment in human history that what the Last Supper was. It would have just been a clay cup on the table. And so the idea that the first communion chalice was this very humble clay cup.
He calls it the cup of a carpenter.
Yeah,
because that looks like a cup of a carpenter.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. So those are the things I think of when I think of Last Crusade. That and the great sequence with the tank.
Yes. Sick. Sick scene.
Yeah. So and seeing Sean Connery at his age still being an action guy is cool.
Even more bumbling than Indiana Jones, which is great.
Yeah.
I love him and his bag and his umbrella. He's always kind of hiding behind things, popping up.
Yeah, but he comes across as the Legend of Drunken Master, the guy who gets drunk on purpose because that's when he'll beat everybody.
He's almost like a Doctor Who character.
Yeah, he's spent a lifetime learning. Oh, I know how I win every time. I just need to bumble around. He just seems like the guy who learned that his secret power is to bumble around, chasing birds to bring down planes.
Yeah, that scene actually, Last Crusade is my favorite out of the trilogy as well. It's so good, but that scene on the beach where he does the birds, I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne. That whole thing, right? And the look on Indy's face as his dad walks by, he's like, where was this guy? Where was this guy when we were getting chased by the Nazis a little while ago? That was awesome. And you see this respect that he suddenly develops for his dad in that moment. I thought that was really, really good. Yeah. Really good moment.
Anything else you want to say about Last Crusade? I know, Chuck, you said your piece.
I've said my piece.
Okay. Mike, you want to go ahead?
It's my absolute favorite. It's so lighthearted and yet serious at the same time. The whole dad relationship is incredible. How he's trying so hard to impress his dad, and Sean Connery's having none of it. He's just not doing it. When he lances the guy off the motorcycle,
Yeah.
right, and he's all happy, and he's like, "Yeah, look what I did," and Sean Connery just like takes out his watch and fixes it, and just looking at him like that was not impressive. Look at it, he's so disappointed. It's so good.
Yeah.
But just everything about that, like it's not as cinematic and grand as Raiders, but I think it does hit those beats of it shows Indiana as the smart guy, and it shows him as the brains and the brawn, and the whole relationship with his dad, and realizing that was what he needed the whole time, and it's a really good movie. I agree with Father Chuck, right? It's one of those things that if I want a good time, that's the movie I'm going to, right? And I like the thing that it has in common with Raiders, which other people have said, that he didn't have to be in the movie at all for the end result to be the same. That was always one of my favorite things about Raiders, is if Indiana Jones never showed up, the exact same end result would have happened. Right? The Nazis all would have gotten zapped by the Ark, and that would have been it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I heard about that. Yeah,
it's the same with this one, right? If Indiana Jones never showed up, the whole finding his dad part aside, the end result would have been the same, because they would have found the Grail. They would have gotten through it eventually, right? And they would have found the Grail, and they would have just drank all the wrong cups, and then would have found the right cup, but then they can't leave because you can't cross the Great Seal, right? So it's like, what? I just thought that was really fun.
Right, and that's why it's kind of setting up like why the relics aren't the most important thing.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting,
and that's the theme that goes through all of them.
Yeah, you can't have it anyway.
Yeah.
Matt, see, I'm letting you all go first because I'm going to go into it. I can't wait.
Yeah,
I'm going to launch into this one.
Well, I'll start with what everybody else says. I love it. But yeah, I'm kind of playing off what I said before. Like Raiders, has a grand aspect and is like the Phantom, the Adventure, all that stuff. Then the Shadow is Temple of Doom. This is Indiana Jones. Mm-hmm. So you get the character in the perfect mix and setting of the fun, the goofiness, but still true to the grand and exciting. Like this, to me, that movie is him complete. That's the character as a whole is reached in Last Crusade, and I mean, and it's funny that, for a character that was in essence partially born of Bond, stars James Bond, the guy who we wouldn't have a concept of James Bond without Sean Connery.
His literal dad.
Here in America, anyway. Yeah, at least here in America, we wouldn't have a concept of James Bond without it. So, guy kind of gave birth to the character that gave birth to the character that he's now playing the father of in a movie. It's go meta with that one, JP. But yeah, it's to me the movie, that one's a great example of the adventurer, the guy who does have it all together at times, and then is so far off at others. He's still the bumbling goofball, but it's still just the natural him being him, and it's still all throughout the movie has even more emphasis on the nerd. He's literally running around with his little journal the whole time that every one of us wanted.
The Grail Diary. Yes.
And he's literally just running around and jotting down his little notes like, hey guys, did you see this yet? Like writing it down and circling things. And I mean,
he's going to show us his Hitler autograph collection.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be excited just by like the paper clips he gets to use. And if Chuck comes back with a Grail Diary,
I think he has a Grail Diary. Do you have a Grail Diary?
Got my little leather.
Nice.
Little leather journal. Little strap on it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's really good.
Should have sent it to the Marx Brothers.
That's really good. I wish I had something similar that I could show off. I don't.
Hey, you chose wisely.
Got a couple of those right there.
You all suck.
I don't have any cool things. I have my fedora.
You have the background, JP. You're sitting in the whole thing. Anyway, so yeah, no, that's all I got to say. Chuck, I have a diary like that one too. That's cool. So I applaud. But I was so close back in the day to paying a stupid amount of money for just a file on a computer that you could print out the individual pages and make it into. You have no idea how close. Instead, JP, you'll get a kick out of this. Instead, I just decided to make my own of what Chuck had there, and that was my senior project in Torbert's class.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah. So,
did it have pages with no names? Taking you to the location of the Grail. I don't know, that was my Elsa impression.
I got this at Bombay.
Nice.
Do you remember Bombay? Bombay at this mall? You know that store?
I don't remember, no.
They sold like globes that looked like old world maps and
like Bombay
dark mahogany furniture.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
Sort of like Z Gallery.
Yeah, the Z Gallery, nice. Yeah, I remember the very first Bible I ever bought. I bought it because it looked like the Grail Diary. So yeah. NIV. So.
Blasphemous.
Oh, okay.
Even
so
King James.
Oh wait, hold on. I feel like I've got to have like some ointment. I think I got some aloe around here because I have a feeling that like a hot take is incoming.
Oh no hot takes.
Oh okay.
No.
This movie sucks.
But I also do want to show off my Indiana Jones satchel. Indiana Jones satchel is in my side. I bought it in China. And
is that the one that I had in my possession for quite a while?
Yes, you did.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in my car.
Hey,
so
did you get your commuter pack yet, Matt?
And show off. It's in the mail.
Yeah, Indiana Jones, an EDC icon. We'll get to that in another episode.
Oh yes, we will. We don't need them, JP. Me and you'll go down.
That's an
episode. Don't worry about it.
Inside joke between me and Matt. We'll get into that another time. Okay, so
I'm lost, Mike. I'm lost.
The Last Crusade.
You're lost. I feel.
I love this movie. Even though, like I said about Temple of Doom, I don't think it's necessarily a masterful work. I do think, though, that Indiana Jones. I think Harrison Ford, like he really gets Indiana Jones by now, like because it's the perfect balance of the masculine, the perfect balance of the humor, perfect balance of the nerdiness, of the hopefulness, the what's the word? What was I thinking?
Like
wide,
wonder.
Yeah, wonder. Wide-eye wonder of Spielberg. I don't.
Try again, JP. Take
I'd wide one.
I'd wide.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think Harrison Ford really gets the character by now. So it's probably Lawrence Kasdan. I think Kasdan didn't write the script actually. I think it was Tom Stoppard. But I'm glad they went with this because I feel like the original idea was not very good, which is supposed to be a haunted house movie. Taking place in Scotland. Yeah. All those castle scenes, the whole movie was going to take place in a haunted castle, and this would be like a battle with like ghosts and demons, and like a holy dagger and stuff is involved. And early drafts of Indiana Jones movies are very strange.
Yeah.
Well, like
when one gets made, you get Crystal Skull.
Yeah. But I love it. I mean, I love the whole quest for the Grail, and that the expert here is not necessarily Indiana Jones, but his dad, because he doesn't really know. Like every time someone recounts something to Indiana Jones about the Grail, he always kind of deflects it like it's a bedtime story, like that's fantasy. Indiana Jones of all people, right?
The guy who had the Ark.
Yeah, exactly. And the relationship between he and his dad is like so perfect. I don't know if you guys know this about Steven Spielberg, but he used to have dad issues.
No, it's not like every one of his movies deals with dad issues.
I was finishing it up today. I watched half of it last night, half of it this morning, and the part that really struck me, and I had to be 37 years old to like really get this. Their conversation between Indiana Jones and Henry on the Zeppelin, Or he's like, you remember the last time we had a drink together? I was having a milkshake. And Henry just doesn't care. Like, he's still just, fiddling with his Grail diary like he was when he was a kid, when Indiana Jones was a kid. And they get into this sort of argument about, like, I wasn't like other dads, I let you do whatever you want. I didn't tell you to wash your ears. I didn't tell you to go to bed. I taught you self-reliance. And he's like,
yeah,
well,
I think he
no,
was
you're
father
like,
of the year, right?
yeah. And he was like, okay, but that's not normal. Like, Indiana Jones is like, that's not normal. That's not what dads do. And then the part that, like, I always thought was like a great line, because it's sort of a good burn. But like watching it now as like a 37-year-old, when he tells Indiana Jones, like, you left just when you were becoming interesting, like, oh, that's harsh. Like, why would you say that to your son? That's kind of messed up. And even and I love Harrison Ford's reaction to it, because it's very natural. He doesn't really know what to say. He doesn't have like a long stare. He's like flabbergasted. He's like, so I thought that was really interesting. Like, their dynamic is so interesting, and that it kind of builds up. Indiana Jones is like, I'm going to be like this ideal, and it's going to be kind of the opposite of who my dad really is. I'm going to make being obsessed with something like cool, and not hurtful. There's also a bunch of other stuff happening that I really love. I think it's interesting that most of the movie takes place in Europe and not some like sort of exotic land. And I think that's sort of Spielberg kind of wanting to play out the James Bond aspect of him, because a lot of it does feel like sort of a 60s era sort of Roger Moore kind of set piece, like the chase through Italy or the chase through Venice on the boats felt very James Bond to me. And also sort of the castle stuff and the motorcycle chases. You pointed this out, Mike, but what I love so much about that whole scene is sort of the consistency of character. The chase begins. They get into the motorcycle with the sidecar, and they run two Nazis off the road, and then begins. And he's like laughing. He looks at his dad. And he's like, "Yeah, not impressed. I don't care." And that's the beginning. And then he goes through all the trouble of like taking out the rest of the Nazis, and he throws the javelin into the guy's spokes, and he like explodes. And then he looks back to Henry's like, "Now are you impressed?" And he's like, and it's so great. And then there's like, and I always laugh when they're in the airplane and they're being chased down, and of course, like Sean Connery like accidentally like shoots out the rear, and he's like, "Son, I'm sorry, they got us." But I love the part where they crash and they're still like chasing after them, and then Henry just goes, "I think those people are trying to kill us." He's like, "I know, Dad."
I love that. It's such a good line. And it's played so well.
Yeah.
It's like he finally clues in.
Yeah. And it just sort of his character throughout the rest of it is still so bumbling and so like kind of adorable, really. And like the part where he goes to save Henry in the tank, even though he's already defeated the Nazis in there and saved Marcus, Henry pops out and he's like, "You call this archaeology?" Like they're bonding. Finally, like they're because now he's starting to be impressed with like what Indiana Jones does, and of course that's the part where they're James Bonding, and of course that's the part where
Hi.
Bye, Chuck. And of course that's the part where I feel like that's kind of where they first start to connect with what he does, and like he's actually thinks it's kind of cool, but of course that's where the tank finally goes over. And, he thinks Indiana Jones had died. And he's like, he has that moment where he's like, I never got to tell him, there's just never any time. And, of course, like, he shows up behind him. He's like, looking over the cliff.
I will say that scene,
yeah,
this is going to sound really corny, and I apologize, but that scene was so different to me after I became a dad than before. Because before, it was like, oh, he's not dead. He's just there. Haha. And then after... when that happened and he realizes he lost his son, like it hit, and it just bam, right in the chest.
Oh no, and I love the hug when he hugs him, and they he kind of, Spielberg is like kind of slowly closing in on Indy's face, and his expression changes from like I just like almost died to like, oh, this is great, he's hugging me, we're having a moment.
Yeah.
And then of course he just lets him go. It's like, no, let's get back to work. He just like collapses. He's like, oh, and the hat rolls by. But I think that is what makes the movie work so well. That's where the sort of the master class is the relationship between Indiana Jones and Henry. Something we've seen his relationships in other movies and they're good, but they're not as dynamic. They're not as emotionally raw as like those two actors are being, and they play off of each other so perfectly. Just a match made in heaven. Like that's the kind of dual role that like every filmmaker kind of prays for, that two actors act off of each other the way. And the big criticism of The Last Crusade is that like there's too much humor, right? That like they took cool characters like Sala and Marcus Brody and kind of turned them into like comedic reliefs, but like it works. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, they weren't totally fleshed out. They were sort of flat characters on their own, just sort of fulfilling archetypes. And this one, to make them more humorous is sort of bursting out of that archetype. And by the third movie, like that's kind of like what you need to do by the third movie is not to just keep playing the same character over and over again. You got to do something different with it. And John Rhys Davies. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say John Rhys Davies, a.k.a. Gimli, a.k.a. Professor Maximilian Arturo from Sliders, is just a wonderful character actor. He plays Sala to just like, I mean, he pushes the envelope with Sala, I think. Sala is great in Raiders, but like he really pushes him in this one. He's so many great lines. And of course, Marcus Brody is so wonderful too. He's such a great, he feels like a character from like a BBC like cozy mystery. Like I love him.
Denholm Elliott, who played Brody,
yeah,
that character could so easily have been annoying.
Yeah,
right. Just being like the comedic guy, right? Just making all these jokes and stuff. But he plays it so perfectly.
I know
that it doesn't get old. Like I would watch a movie of Brody trying to find his way around a city,
or is his own museum,
right?
The time he got lost, the time he got lost in the museum, that'd be fun. But like, yeah, even watching him playing off Sean Connery is like so perfect and so great. Like they're like two kids playing. Like it's wonderful.
Yeah, the little secret handshake in the tank always makes me laugh.
I love it. The pen is mightier than the sword. So it's I mean, I love Last Crusade. It has a special place in my heart. Like I said, my dad took me to see it first movie I can recollect. And it's always stuck with me. And the inside joke between me and him, both my dad and I share a name, just like Indiana Jones and his dad. And of course, what does my dad always call me now because of that freaking movie? Junior. Every now and then he'll just bust out a Junior because of Indiana Jones. So yeah, I do love Last Crusade, and I think it's a very special movie. So that leaves us with one more film.
And the Crystal Skull happened. Thanks, guys. It's been nice.
What'd you say, Chuck?
And Fate of Atlantis.
Oh, the Fate of Atlantis. You want to talk about Fate of Atlantis? Let's talk about the Sky Pirates novel.
Or the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, or
See,
the books.
Literally,
here's what I want to find out, Mike. You mentioned you only had one book of the Young Indiana Jones books. Which one was it?
Oh, I don't remember, man. That was 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Mine was the one with the Rough Riders.
Oh, okay.
I know. I remember it had a train on the cover. I think that's all I can remember. I don't remember what it was called.
You know what's funny about those books is that the first time I discovered those books was when I was a kid, and I was visiting MGM Studios, or at the time it was MGM Studios, and of course it has the Epic Stunt Spectacular, and they have the Indiana Jones gift shop. And they had every single one. And I was just like, there's Indiana Jones books? I'm just like reading the back of all of them. Because I couldn't really... I guess they were like out of print other places. I never saw them anywhere else, but except for...
Look, let's acknowledge something really quick, right? Because there is an elephant in the room, right? There's an unfired gun, and that is Crystal Skull.
Okay, all right.
Here's what I'm going to say about Crystal Skull. I watched it a few weeks ago. I don't think it was nearly as bad. Like, maybe because I hadn't I had never seen it in theaters. I never, so it was one of these things where I think that I had heard so much vitriol about the movie that I was prepared for it to be just like the absolute worst thing that was ever made.
Yeah.
And it turned out I didn't think it was as bad as people made it out to be. And that's really all I can say about it. I don't think it was as bad as other people made it out to be.
I
had a good time.
No, Matt, don't commit suicide.
No, I had a good time.
I mean,
That's it.
It wasn't Battlefield Earth, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't
Right.
that level of technical.
Right.
It wasn't Ready Player One.
At least,
But like I said, I didn't see it in theaters, so I didn't get into like I was interested in seeing an Indiana Jones movie again. Like I was excited about it, but I wasn't like it wasn't like the same thing. There's enough time between when it came out and when I watched it that I don't think it's like if I were to like I recently watched all the Star Wars movies with my kids and I watched the prequels and I come away feeling that Phantom Menace is the best of the prequel trilogy for a variety of reasons. And I kind of feel like that's my feeling of Crystal Skull is like it's not as bad. I'm not saying it's good. I just think it's as bad as some people make it out to be.
it's.
I mean, I agree with. I think it is sort of overblown for comedy's sake. I definitely do it for a good laugh.
Yeah,
because I didn't love it.
It's a weird movie.
It is a weird movie. It is
really, really weird.
It feels like I said, like if you've ever read early drafts, I haven't read like whole scripts or anything, but I've like read summaries of like early drafts of other Indiana Jones movies, and they're very strange. And I'm like, you can tell why they ditched this. Crystal Skull feels like Matt said. I mean, Matt was joking, but it does feel like an early draft of something, and not like
It's got a lot of good ideas. Like there are good ideas in that film.
Yeah.
It just poorly executed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I like the idea of Indiana Jones and aliens. I'm okay with that. I was always okay with
that didn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
Something that frustrates me about this movie is okay, great, we're going with Russians, fine.
Yeah.
But you go to South America, and there have been Nazis hiding out in South America. You could have still had friggin' Nazis,
and they would have been fun because they would be like his age, right? That'd be kind of funny.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Anyway,
just a bunch of old Nazis. That would be great.
That'd be really funny. Indiana Jones just punching an old guy in the face in the middle of the city. I recognize that guy from the castle.
That'd be great. I was one of the
thing that
motorcyclists. This is for my motorcycle, Jones.
I sat through this one again yesterday, and the thing that struck me about it was it looks really fake.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what they did with the lighting, but it looks really fake. Even the stuff that I know wasn't faked, right?
Yeah.
Some of the bits in the jungle and stuff like that where they filmed it on location, I know that, but it looks CGI'd, and everything was perfectly clean, which I thought was a little bit weird. Like all their uniforms were perfectly clean. At the end, when they get like shoved out in that like big rush of water, right?
Right.
The next scene is Indiana talking to Marion, and his jacket is immaculate. Like it just got it back from the dry cleaners.
Yeah.
Like it's weird. It's weird like that.
Yeah, I think, and it's because, I think and those details like that, like I was saying, what made Raiders so special, and the other movies too, is that like because of Harrison Ford, what he wanted to bring to it was like he wanted you to feel his pain when he got punched or when he fell. Now he's an old man, and it's like they kind of made him superhero in a way. And you have to reconcile some things. It's like, okay, he's an old man, and he's still like jumping around and stuff. Like, how are we still going to introduce the fact that he like still gets hurt? Like, I don't know. It's just,
should we talk about the fridge, or should we just skip it?
I don't know. I don't know what Matt's thinking.
I want to talk about the legacy of the fridge real quick, because the fridge that sequence has been kicked around in the Spielberg world for decades.
I was just about to touch on this because I heard about this recently.
So I don't know if you know about all this, Mike, but like at one point that was going to be the time travel device in Back to the Future.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Was going to involve like was the time machine was like basically built on a refrigerator that was going to be nuked to give them enough power to send them back in time or whatever, and they decided to scrap that because they were concerned about kids locking themselves in abandoned refrigerators,
Fair.
to travel through time. And then I'm trying to remember where it showed up again.
I don't know the other places, but I know that back to it was the clock tower scene was supposed to be that and scene for scene too, like when Indiana Jones does in Crystal Skull. He goes to this suburban town and there are mannequins there, and he goes into the refrigerator. And,
yeah,
that was the clock tower scene.
And that scene, I was on board with that scene, right? He was like,
funny.
You just see he's super confused, like, what the hell is going on? why is there mannequins? What? I'm so confused. And then it just kind of.
Yeah. Matt, what are your thoughts on Crystal Skull? You called me right away. I remember that. I remember it vividly.
I hate it.
You and I tried to come up with
Sorry.
excuses to love it.
I tried so hard. I tried to justify it so hard. I tried to talk JP into it, and then I saw it a second time, and hate is a strong word. I say that for the sake of the podcast, but no, there's nothing about the movie as far as Indiana Jones that is redeemable to me. They took my childhood hero and turned him into a joke. And they made it look like he's on the set of Grease while he did it. And
I kind of like the 50s stuff. That's just me, though.
I don't. But they made everything look like that. Like he's saying, the perfect uniforms, the perfect jungle.
Yeah. Too clean.
Like,
I know what you mean. Yeah, not
it's
gritty.
it's like Indiana Jones, the High School Musical. No. I'm sorry, but no. And I tried so hard to be like, well, I mean, if we can buy that he, all the Bible stuff came true to him, and we can buy that all the mystical stuff in India came true, then we can buy that there's aliens in this universe too. No, I don't buy that either. It just drives me nuts. I'm like, if I wanted X-Files, I would go watch X-Files, and if I wanted the crappy X-Files like this movie, I'd go watch the last 2 seasons they came back for of X-Files.
It's funny because George Lucas says it was always supposed to be like X-Files. He even said that.
No, see, no.
I don't mind the alien
Lucas,
thing. I just wish they would commit to aliens instead of interdimensional beings.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't throwaway line.
Lucas has a bad habit of not knowing when to quit while he's ahead, and just keep your mouth shut, man. It's perfect. Just shut up. If everybody thinks it's perfect, why are you trying to prove them otherwise? It's perfect.
Well, Lucas has this real bad problem of being surrounded by sycophants that don't know how to tell him no, and he needs people to tell him no. I mean, case in point, the original trilogy of Star Wars only existed because people told him no a lot, and the prequels were just so self-indulgent, and that's what's wrong with them. It's so frustrating to watch a lot of Lucas's stuff, prequels, and then also Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because you can see there's a good movie in there, in all of it. It just needed somebody to bring it out.
Yeah.
That movie shot with restrictions and restraints to be not in a fan service way, because I don't need it to look like the old Indiana Jones movies, but shot to at least keep it in the vein of look, there's a reason these movies are iconic. There's a tone to it that you don't have to stay totally true to, but it does need to be present in some way, shape, or form, not be a complete goofball comedy. But that movie, as a Indiana Jones going to explore this Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, this Crystal Skull concept, and it could be aliens, it could be interdimensional beings, to leave a mystery aspect to it to where you're not really sure what it is at the end. Just like I don't know what the heck is flying out of the Ark of the Covenant when it really comes down to it. Angels, demons, spirits, whatever. The point is, leave the mystery, the mysticism. I don't need him in the middle of a flying away spaceship and his Mulder shot as he's watching it fly off into outer. It's BS. It's BS. It's not Indiana Jones.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, and I like that it's set in the 50s. I like the mythology of the Crystal Skulls and stuff. I like the aliens, but I think you're all kind of right in that it is a little too immaculate. His cinematographer was Janusz Kaminski, was sort of someone I think he started working with on Schindler's List, and he has this really strange way of lighting things that I don't love.
But just everything looked like it was against a matte painting.
Yeah.
Everything.
But even take the possibility of if they just put like okay, we want to stick with the Indiana Jones idea of this guy who's like the tough guy, but he's bumbling through. Just think like a difference if everything was that perfect, clean, immaculate, because it's the 50s. I think that's what they're going for. That like magic 50s idea. So just imagine if Indiana Jones was the only character throughout the movie who looked like crap. Like he looks like he's been beat up. If his clothes are constantly filthy and he's just constantly looking at people while he's like shaking the mud off, and they're standing there in their like perfectly pressed uniforms. Like, I mean, just a little touch like that to add something of him to this movie, and instead we got like, I don't know. My theory is Harrison Ford's kind of notorious for not wanting to return back to these characters. So my theory is he agreed to do Han Solo only if Han Solo died. And I think he agreed to do Crystal Skull knowing it would kill Indiana Jones.
Which
because
it's just... Because you're still making the fifth one.
Wait. It's just...
Did you not hear this?
I don't...
And Spielberg is not directing it.
Yeah.
I knew that they've been trying forever, but I know it's just whatever. But it's just... No, I don't like it. I can't.
Yeah,
I got really nervous towards the end of that movie. I got really nervous. The very last scene when Shia the Beef picks up the hat.
Yeah.
And is just about to put it on, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh, please no, please stop this." And then Indy just comes in and grabs the hat. Like, "Oh, thank you you so much."
It's like it's Spielberg kind of new, like don't know if I do this, it'll piss him off. But yeah,
becoming just a face in the screen here. I'm like,
yeah, it's getting darker.
Well, I gotta say, Matt, I appreciate the fact that your record is in a car while there is a thunderstorm going on. It's actually something. It's like the one thing from Florida, other than people, that I miss is Florida thunderstorms.
If I turn this off completely for a second, will you get a good silhouette in the lightning at the right moment, like the Indiana Jones?
This would be the time. So how about Raiders of the Lost Ark, guys? He's got the lightning storm.
I'm like digging. Can I get?
He's just a shadow.
Yeah.
God's
so
not sending me any lightning, guys. I'm sorry. I don't get to be cool.
So yeah, Crystal Skull. I don't. Man, I don't know. I can't defend it. Like I can. There are things about it that I like. Some flourishes of Spielbergness coming through that are great. But at the same time, I don't like how it looks. I don't like Kaminsky's cinematography or lighting. Costuming is okay, I guess. The only set piece I like the chase through Marshall College and stuff, because it's the only one that looks authentic. This one looks like it's actually happening.
You mean,
well, and the sequence in the beginning of the warehouse.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Huh?
You don't like vine swinging and.
Oh my gosh! Don't know the monkeys.
Or like giant ants.
Yeah, and how about this? And like, even though this is we're just being introduced to this character Ox, you think it's bad that Sala and Marcus Brody were turned into comedic characters. How about taking an actor like John Hurt in his twilight years and just kind of turning him into like just like a brain dead person? Like, yeah, what a waste. That's a waste.
It was a waste.
Yeah,
it was a complete waste. That character could have been anybody.
Because it was such a big mystery at the time. Like, ooh, who's John Hurt playing? Like, we know he's going to be in it. So is he going to be like, is he like the real villain? Is he going to be like one of Henry Jones's lost colleagues, which he ended up being? But then it's like, oh, but he's like an incoherent idiot. All right.
Right.
So that's just kind of lame. But yeah, I don't love it, and that's a good way to segue into Indiana Jones 5. Which is not being directed by Steven Spielberg, instead to be directed by James Mangold, who is a great director. Logan is a great movie. But I don't want a sad Indiana Jones movie. Please, God, no. Because it has to take place in the 70s by now, right? Like, that's going to be kind of weird. He's going to watch Star Wars. Like,
it's Indiana Jones, like, driving through New York, just going, hippies.
Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea how it's going to play out. All I know is that if it's going to be like a sad Indiana Jones movie, I'm going to be a sad JP. Like I don't think I need Indiana Jones confronting his mortality.
You just keep it going longer, and like Indiana Jones can like stumble on the set of them making Raiders of the Lost Ark, like in the course of the movie.
I would leave the theater. I would leave the theater.
That's
Well, you know,
BS Crystal Skull would have done.
It goes back. I'm gonna geek out on my Masters of Divinity fandom now, but it goes back to an episode that you did a little while ago about endings, right? Endings need to make a comeback.
Yeah.
It's that, right? It's okay. How many more of these are you gonna pump out? Like, are you gonna do one more than Harrison? Are you gonna just kill off Harrison Ford, or are you just gonna stop? Right?
I mean, one could argue that it ended with Last Crusade.
In my head, it did.
no.
They rode off into the
did.
sunset, man. Like,
Yeah.
that's
It has the word "last" in the title.
It was originally supposed to be a trilogy. Like George Lucas said, if you make this movie, you have to make 2 more. They didn't talk about a fourth one.
Yeah, and like
No,
the first one is Old Testament, the sequel it's New Testament. I mean, it's a beautiful bookend, and it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they do a Book of Mormon version, I'm going to be very upset.
Oh, I was actually thinking about that the other day. I would love that, to be honest. Like the whole, like
he finds the gold. He finds the gold tablets.
because Mormon mythology rules. It rules, and I would love to see Indiana Jones and the golden tablets or something.
and the angel Moroni
Yes.
Yeah.
and the salamander. He finds a salamander. that's in
The Angel Moroni turned out to be a crystal skulled alien.
And it's just like the bad guys is just like one dude and all of his wives, and they're like instead of like a bunch of Nazis.
I'm on board now. I'm on board now.
All of
like
his
a
wives.
Manson cult thing. I'm on board.
If they don't make this, I might. I have no experience, but I might make that movie.
Can we talk about Indiana Jones side stories, movies that take place within the Indiana Jones universe, like The Rocketeer?
Does it? Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. I feel like it does.
I love it. I love the Rocketeer. It's a good movie.
I love The Rocketeer.
Yeah.
Or like Goonies, which takes place like in the Indiana Jones universe, but like in the 80s.
One of the gangsters is wearing Indiana Jones's hat from Temple of Doom. They stole it. They stole it from the set.
All right.
And also, Short Round is in that movie.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, it is.
2 beloved characters, Short Round and Data.
Maybe Data is Short Round's son.
Maybe. Short Round should come back in the 5th movie, and he's just...
Now if we keep talking, inverse.com is going to like catch our thing and they're like, this theory postulates.
Screen Rant. We're going to end up on Screen Rant.
All right, so we've talked Indiana Jones.
Yeah, well, I was going to...
You got this whole little thing at the end here that I think is entertaining.
Yeah, I was going to grill you on revealing the location of the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, and the Cross of Coronado, since you went to seminary.
I mean,
you're the only real Christian here, apparently.
I mean, you're a man of the cloth. You're essentially the Society of the Cruciform Sword, right?
Cruciform Sword. Yeah.
When I discovered that my seminary had like Babylonian like tablets in the basement of our library, I was like, wait, what else is in here? Like this is like a Giles situation. Like there could be some cool stuff down here.
Wait. I have to pause before you get into this because first of all, Mike, I have to say I'm impressed by JP and Chuck's ability to make sure that we have referenced everything from our podcast, from sliders to. But I am also impressed that Chuck is the one who just referenced Giles.
Well, Giles is his favorite character, right? Like that was
it just makes me proud though that we didn't have to bring up Buffy. We can let somebody else do it. It's all right. I'm so proud of you right now, Chuck.
Would it be funny if I could just spout off a whole bunch of like just deep cut Angel and Buffy trivia right now? Like I've just been like sitting on this for years and I just suddenly like let it out.
I would cry. You would see actual tears.
Shark reveals he actually has the angel tattoo on his forearm with the A from the Book of the Kells.
Tablets in your basement at school.
The location of the Holy Grail is, of course, in Ethiopia. Everyone knows this.
Well, that's Ark of the Covenant, right?
Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. What did I say?
You said
Holy
Holy
Grail.
Grail.
The Holy Grail. That's in
Holy
Rosslyn
I mean, I'm
Chapel.
sure the Grail doesn't actually exist, but you know,
It's in Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, isn't it?
that's
There we
just,
go. Yeah.
it's actually
Or-
Mary Magdalene.
Or is it in Mike's ship hold room that he's in, and he's sipping from it as an immortal? How do we know that he's not like 2,000 years old?
That's the only way he'd have time to listen to us babble.
He could be Saint John the Evangelist, right? Saint John the Evangelist, right? Like he, he refused to die. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
He's one of the three brothers.
I would look that old, right? Like the Grail Knight, right? He looks 900 years old.
Yeah, he's one of the cruciform sword knights. Yeah. Knights of the cruciform sword. Yeah. Okay, so you don't know where the Ark is. I mean, well,
no, but let me
Ethiopia.
tell you a story. Can I tell you a story about relics, though?
Okay, Ark.
A very funny story about relics. So I think it's a funny story about relics. So I had made friends when I was in Boca with in Boca Raton with the priest of the Armenian church down the street, and he so we get to talking, and I mentioned I'm at the Chapel of St. Andrew, and he's like, oh, St. Andrew. He's like, I have his relics. I'm like, wait, like what? And he's like, yeah, I have a relic of St. Andrew. He said, one day I was going through the sacristy, which is like where all the vestments and church stuff is kept. He said, I'm going through all of that, and I go through a drawer, and I find there's like a whole collection of relics. He has like St. John the Evangelist. He has like the main saint of the Armenian church. He's got St. Andrew. He's just got like this whole collection. Some priest somewhere had acquired these and just sort of dumped them in a drawer, and this guy just found them. And he was like, if you'd like to borrow one sometime, you totally can. So we borrowed the relic of St. Andrew when I was installed as rector at the Chapel of St. Andrew from this Armenian church. The guy found it just sort of stashed in a drawer somewhere. I think it's funny.
Amazing.
The relics thing to delve into the other half of what your podcast does. The relics thing is always fascinating. It's always incredibly interesting. Like Rosslyn Chapel always makes me laugh because of the Grail thing, right? But one of the rumors is that there's a secret vault in the basement of Rosslyn Chapel, and inside they have the mummified head of Christ. It's one of the stories that's been going around about Rosslyn Chapel. Like, that's up there. That is up there. That's not saying like this is the finger bone of some saint. That's a pretty intense thing to claim.
That's more other than the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah.
The Shroud of Turin, which they've determined like its age, but people still insist on it being like an actual like photocopy of Jesus.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah. I gotta say though, having been to the Holy Land and going in some of these old churches, man, like the idea that some of this stuff could be just like stuck in a corner somewhere and somebody forgot about it, like I think there's some possibility there. I mean, you go to the Church of the Holy Nativity in Bethlehem and like just see the piles of ancient things that are just in a corner.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Like
people forget stuff all the time.
I went to Damascus back in 2007. And in Syria, and it's like churches and dwelling spots where where Paul hung out. Like there's like this little hut that's like perfectly preserved because apparently that's like where Paul lived at one point. They have doors and like gated areas that are supposedly like ancient, and they're just there like in the marketplace for like anyone to be like, oh, here's a door, Where did Matt go? He's gone.
No, I just turned I'm seeing spots. I had to turn the light off for a second. Like I can't see outside the car, so you know how you just get like that kind of dizzy feeling?
Yeah.
No.
The rain's not helping.
Okay.
I'm like in the ocean now.
I'm really just saying that so that Chuck is the only one flexing that he's been to ancient sites that Indiana Jones might have gone to. I've also been to ancient sites where Indiana Jones might have gone to.
I went to Rome. He would have went there, right? Like the Colosseum and stuff. No, maybe he would have went to like the Colosseum.
He would have been to Rome,
right?
He totally went to Venice, man. Venice.
Yeah. Well, I've been to Venice, but I was more interested that James Bond was there. But
would he have been to Hawaii? Would Indiana Jones have gone to Hawaii?
It's not old enough. Something would have had to be taken.
He might have stopped there on the way to Easter Island, maybe.
Probably. Yeah. And he did go to Easter Island and Indiana Jones and the Hollow Earth. Or was that the Interior World? He went to the Hollow Earth twice in the novels.
Okay, now we're getting to a whole other level here.
I really don't have that much time, guys. Like, that's a whole no.
I was gonna do some stuff. I don't really want to do it because I kind of feel like I've kind of done them throughout the episode. So my top 5 thing, I've already talked about characters I liked and stuff. So I think honestly I think that's a great place to end it. Yeah. Okay.
I don't like endings.
I don't either. I'm not good at them. So
Like J.J. Abrams.
Yeah. At least I can land one. Come on.
Ouch.
Okay, great. So finally, we did an episode on Indiana Jones. Way to go. I want to thank Mike, our fan and our contributor. Thank you so much for all your contributions and for coming out and talking to it with us about Indiana Jones. It was a great episode. I had a great time. I know everybody else did as well.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you very much for the invite. Hopefully this doesn't end with a Grail Knight showing up on your doorstep going, "You chose poorly." Yeah.
That would happen to me. That's just my luck. It would.
It ends with, for the rest of my life, telling Chuck he's wrong about that movie. We'll just add it to Tron Legacy and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I also want to thank Father Chuck and Matt for being.
And don't forget Avatar, Matt. Don't forget Avatar.
Oh man,
the
age of Avatar is upon us.
Sometime. Hold on.
It is.
We gotta talk about Avatar sometime, guys, because I watched it again and I didn't say that movie when I listed off the 2 that I think are stupid. So we gotta talk.
I have a convert.
Let's talk. No, I'm not quite there, but I see it. I'm seeing the potential and excitement.
You'll be speaking Navi. Oh
No.
Oh boy.
No.
Dude, he's gonna get one of those Navi hoodies.
I take
Ferngullion space is okay.
Putting it right back.
Nice.
Right back.
All right. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Find us on Facebook, on Instagram. Donate to our Patreon, and hey, you might get your own episode as well. You'll talk about whatever you want. Yeah,
I'm
be like
proof
Mike.
it can happen.
Join us again next time. Have a wonderful week. Good journey.
Mahalo.
Good journey.
Oh, he's too good for good journey now.